Good morning. This is Mike McGinn, your online instructor for NetI 105. And what this presentation is today is a basic navigation training video for NetLab. As you know, many of the labs in this course require the use of NetLab. NetLab is a platform that the university subscribes to that is a platform where there are virtual equipment pods for your use for doing lab activities. For purposes of this course, these equipment pods are Cisco equipment, and you'll see more about that here in a few minutes. A quick comment about labs. In the curriculum, the labs for the most part require NetLabs, but there are a few labs that either require you using your own PC or don't require any equipment at all, and you just simply do some research on the internet. But the vast majority of them do require NetLabs. So I'm going to share my screen now, and what you will see is you will see the NetLab logon screen. And what I am going to do, first of all, the NetLab URL is netlab1.ivtech.edu. And I'm going to use my student credentials to log in. Now, what you may see when the first time you go into NetLab, after a while, it will prompt you to do a self-test of your computer to make sure that all the prerequisites on your computer are such that the NetLab platform will run properly. Normally, the only thing that you might need to do is to update your Java, and it should work fine. It is supported under various browsers, etc. So here we are at the Welcome to NetLab screen, and you'll see that what comes up, there are 4 boxes. Primarily, you'll go into the scheduler, and this is where you schedule time on a equipment pod in order to do your lab. There's also a section here for managing files, and this is, you do have the ability within a lab to be able to save your configs and be able to actually load them in a later reservation. So if you have a reservation, I believe the minimum reservation in this course is an hour and a half. So if you find that you're running close on time, you can save your configs, and then you can bring up another reservation, and you can load your configs, and you're right back where you were when you ran out of time on the previous reservation. So managing your files, your various saved configs, etc., are done in the file manager. Your personal profile settings, this is basically just kind of telling you how things are set up. You shouldn't really ever have to go into here to do anything. And the chat, shouldn't really need to use that for anything unless you're just a social butterfly. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you how you can schedule a reservation for a particular lab. So I'm going to click on Scheduler, and what will show up next is a list of the classes for which you are currently using NetLab for. And for this class, this would be the class that would show up, NetI 10500C 201620 McGinn. So I'm going to click on that. And then what comes up is the list of labs that you can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the first one, building a simple network. And what will come up next is the actual scheduling dialog. So what we see here is we see a calendar, and it defaults to the current day, and you can see that the current time shows up over here on the right, and the day shows here. And what you see across the top here are various columns, and each one of these columns represents an equipment pod. The red line that goes across here is basically showing you where the current time is on the schedule. And if you see any entries in here, these are currently active reservations that are going on a particular pod. So what you want to do to schedule some lab time is to pick a pod, and it doesn't really matter which one. And if you click in a partial time slot, what will happen is it will allow your reservation to start immediately, and then you can set it up to half-hour increments to be no more than an hour and a half. So the reason why I mention that is that if I go and click there, it says now, and it's now until 9 a.m. But if I increase it to 9:30 a.m., which would give me more than an hour and a half, and I try to initiate the schedule, it's going to tell me that it exceeds the maximum length of class, maximum length of the lab reservation, which is 1 hour and 30 minutes. So if you want to get the full hour and a half, what you want to do is you want to click in a full box, and you'll just have to wait for that time to come before you can get into your lab, but at least you get the full hour and a half. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is I am going to, for expediency's sake, I am going to go ahead and create a lab to start now and until 9 a.m. And the default is the load default configs for exercise. Now, if you want to restore your configs from your last reservation for that pod, you can click this button, and it'll look at the previous reservation for you in that pod and load those configs. A no configs loaded is a completely clean set of equipment, which if you just want to go in there and play around on your own on the equipment, that would be the prompt you would want to use. But the load default configs for the exercise is typically what you're going to want to use. So it says I've made the reservation, and it gives me a reservation ID, which is not really that important. And I click I'm done. And then notice it goes back to my main display, my Welcome to NETLAB display. And you notice up here it shows my reservation, and it says it's from 7:47 to 9 a.m. And there's a button here that says Enter Lab. Now if you create a reservation in the future, what you will find is that Enter Lab will not show up, but this entry showing you when your reservation is scheduled will. So since I set the reservation to start immediately, I can enter the lab immediately, and that's what I'm going to do now. So what happens next is it starts the equipment pod. This takes a few minutes to do. So I'm going to pause this until we get to the pod being fully started. Okay, once the lab is, the equipment pod is fully started, the next screen you'll see is you'll see the screen for your lab. And in this case, it's 2.3.3.3 lab building a simple network. And from this topology tab, it gives you some brief information about the environment, the topology of the lab. And in this case, we've got two PCs that are interconnected by two switches. One thing that NETLAB does that is different than if you were actually doing a lab on physical equipment is it makes all your cable connections for you. And so when you see dialogue in your lab content that says that you need to connect the cables and you need to have console cables plugged in and all that kind of stuff, that's all essentially done for you. Saves you a little time on the lab itself. But notice up here on the left it says it's initializing, and that's because even though you're into your pod, excuse me, it's still booting up. And so while that's initializing, I want to take you through some of these tabs here on the top and kind of explain to you what those are for. Action is where you can take physical actions on the device itself. You can do scrub device, which basically does like a factory reset to it. You can recover the password if you need to. If you've forgotten your password, you can power it off, you can power it on, you can reboot it, etc. You can do that for any particular device, or you can do it for the entire pod. Normally, you're not going to need to do this for any reason unless for some reason it's explicitly instructed in the lab itself. Now, the status is something you'll probably go in and look at a little more often. Tells you the status of each device. When the pod initializes, it turns on all the equipment automatically, and it tells you the current status. And notice we're still in the initializing status. So what the status of all these devices right now is booting up the device. The ASA is already booted up and is in the normal state, although we don't use an ASA in this course. And then your 3 PCs are up and running and fine. Typically when I want to get into, now you can see that the status has changed to loading initial configuration, so it's still going through the process. To actually access the devices, if you were consoled into it, you just click on, and I normally do it from this screen, I click in onto the device that I want to get into, and then it will take me to a CLI prompt. Now notice I am now in normal, and so now I'm ready to begin my lab activities. But moving quickly through the rest of the tabs here, the connections is where it tells me if I'm logged into a particular device through the console or otherwise, etc. Not something that I normally go into unless I just unless I want to verify something. The load and the save tabs, this is something that you might want to make note of, is what you can do is you can save configs for any devices or all devices and save them to a file. And what it does is it puts it in a folder that is yours, that's attached to your account within NetLabs. So the reason why this is important is if, let's say that you've worked on a lab for an hour and the phone rings and, oh my gosh, you forgot you need to pick up your son or daughter at daycare, and so you got to drop everything and go, but you got an hour into this. What you can do is you can save all your configs to a file or any individual device to a file, and then that after you save it, it will show up in the load list of files. Now, what that means is that, let's say 3 hours from now, you can create another reservation, and once you're initialized and everything's ready to go, you're as if you're starting the lab over. Well, what you can do is you can go to the load and load your files, your config files, and then you're right back where you left off on the lab that you were working on. This is also important if you find that a lab is a little bit tougher for you than average, and you're running out of time, the hour-and-a-half time slot. For the most part, for most students, an hour-and-a-half should be enough to get through the labs. And then finally, the last tab is just in a way that you can change your exercise, so that if you loaded up the module for building a simple network and you want to switch the lab environment to configuring a switch management address, you can just highlight that, click change exercise, and it reconfigures the pod for that particular exercise. shouldn't normally need to use this. To access your lab content, going back to the topology tab, if you click your show lab content, it brings up a PDF of your lab and you can proceed with going through the instructions. But like I said, is that because we're using NetLab, a lot of the times the first part of the lab, powering on the devices, connecting the two switches, connecting the PCs to the respective switches, etc., are pretty much done for you. Really, you go right to, in most labs, configuring the PC hosts or configuring the devices, etc. So now, to access your devices, I normally like to go into the status and then I just pick whatever device I want to get into. So for example, if I want to console into R1, I just click on R1 and it brings up a CLI terminal and it will prompt you for the applet that it needs to be able to do that. You just click run and then very quickly you are into that particular device. You can be in multiple devices at a time or console into multiple devices at a time, and what it does is it brings up a different window for each, and you can actually be working on multiple ones. And the thing that's nice is each device you bring up, the color of the background is different, so that's supposed to help you keep straight what device is what. The hostname command in the global configuration mode is something that you need to, by matter of practice, and it's usually specified to be done in most labs, actually makes the prompt help keep you straight, the command prompt. So once I click enter, the default hostname for the device router shows up. Now I'm in a position where I can start to configure the device. Now you can see I've gone ahead and changed the prompt to R1, so now I know whenever this is up I'm working on router R1. So it's just that simple to get in and start configuring a device based on the instructions that are in the lab. There's also the other devices you may use. R1, 2, and 3 are routers. S1 and 2 are switches. PC A, B, and C are PCs that are available to you in the lab, in the pod. And to bring up a PC, you just click on it, and it brings up a PC remote viewer. And you actually have a virtual PC for your use in that particular lab. And so as you can see, I have 3 windows open, one for each, and so I can work on, go back and forth between various interfaces. So again, if I'm getting too close on my time, and it shows me on my NetLab display how much time I have left, but let's say I was down to 5 minutes and I still had some ways to go on my lab, I could save all my configs. So I could do a save all, and I can create a folder that it's, let's say it's lab building simple network, and I click save all, and those are all the devices that it's going to save, and it's submitted all those tasks, and then I can, once the dialog clears, now if I do a load, you can see that lab building simple network is there. I can, if I'm in this reservation, still in this reservation or in a future reservation, I can click that lab building a simple network, and I can click load all devices, and with a default clear current configuration before loading, and that will put me right back where I was when I exited the previous reservation. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of NetLab. I hope this is helpful for you for future labs. And if you have any questions, let me know. Also, um, when you assign passwords and stuff, it's recommended that you use a console password or Cisco and an enable secret class so it's consistent in case you ever want to load a lab later, you can remember what your passwords are. So if you have any questions or concerns, email me and I'll do what I can to help you out. Thank you.